As we move through this beginning part of the service, it's called Kabbalat Shabbat, and the intention is that we ready ourselves to receive Shabbat. Since even though Friday night comes every week, whether we like it or not, whether we're ready or not, we recognize that sometimes we both might find that we have more opportunity to kind of relish in a Friday evening as opposed to another day of the week when we might have more going on. And so we have a few extra psalms at the beginning of the service. But I also think that it gives us an opportunity to be able to really transition from the busyness of our week, to be able to take even just this hour that we're together, even if it's not the entire rest of Shabbat, to be able to experience a little bit of a taste of what Shabbat is meant to be. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel calls it a palace in time. And so whatever it is that's happening in that palace, let it be that it is glorious. And so for the time that we are able to kind of sit in Shabbat, that hopefully it can be so as well. And in order to be able to do that, we sometimes need to be able to look back on our week. And it's a great opportunity to see all of the amazing things that happened and things that we want to hold on to, things that maybe brought us joy that we want to take with us into our weekend. It's also an opportunity to recognize the painful moments in our lives and around the world, and to acknowledge those as well, and to hold those in our heart, and to learn from them, and to be able to begin to heal from whatever it is that we might be feeling. And so as we move into Shabbat this week, I want to just ask all of you to think about your weeks. If there's anything that you want to share with us, we would love to either be able to support you in your pain and struggles, to celebrate your joy, and to hear whatever it is that you might be feeling grateful for as we sit here tonight. You don't have to share aloud, but you can if you want. Well, I will just say that I am feeling grateful that I made it through the first week of school with my kids. Transitioning to a whole new schedule is not always easy, but we did it. I'm grateful that the first week is a short week, so it's like gives us a little bit more time to figure it out, and next week is going to be a whole long one, so we'll see how that goes. But so far, so good in my house. I hope the same is true for you guys as well. Genevieve, yeah, so far, so good? Yeah. So I hope that we have, wonderful and fruitful years of learning and building community wherever we are. So I will ask you to continue to consider those questions for you as we move through our service. And perhaps it prompts you to share with one another at some moment. Or to say thank you to someone who's in the room or not for something that happened this week, and that this is something that you can do every week, no matter where you are, even if it's just for a moment as you begin to settle in and transition into Shabbat. So we'll continue on page 14 at the red arrow.
ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, מטייי הארץ. ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, מטייי הארץ. ירם הים, Yeram hayam, yeram hayam, umelo. Yeram hayam, yeram hayam, yeram hayam, umelo.
We turn now to page 23, and I invite Emily up to the bima to help lead us in Lecha Dodi.
Likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, ish Shmi'anu El Hamyuchad, Adonai Echad, U'Shemo Echad, L'Shem U'Tiferet V'Lichila. Lecha, Dodi Lecha, Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Likrat Shabbat Lechu V'Nelcha, Ki Mekor HaBracha, Me'erosh Mikedem Nisucha, Sof Ma'aseh B'Machshava Tchila. Lecha, Dodi Lecha, Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Mikdash Melech Ir Melucha, Kumitza'im mitoch ha'chafecha, Rav lach shevet ba'emek ha'bacha, Vehu yichmo alayechem la. Lecha, Dodi Lecha, Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela.
We continue on page 25 at the second verse.
Yamin U'Smol Tifroti, V'et Adonai Ta'aritzi, Ayad Ish Ben Partzi, V'nismecha V'nagila. Lecha, Dodi Lecha, Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela.
I invite you to rise and face the door as we symbolically welcome our Sabbath Queen.
Bo'i v'shalom ma'ateret ba'ala, Gam b'simcha u'v'tzola, Toch emunei am segula, Bo'i chala, Bo'i chala. Lecha, Dodi Lecha, Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, P'nei Shabbat Nekavela.
You may be seated. We turn to page 27 for the Psalm for Shabbat.
Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbat, Toledos Ladonai, Lozmeshim Chad Yom, Give Becher Zdechem, Chaber, Lezer,
We continue silently and we'll come back together at the red arrow on page 28.
Tzadik atama yifrach, Erez balvanon yizkeshetulim, Mavit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu. Od yenuvun beseva, Deshenim verananim yiyu lehagid, Ki Yashar Adonai tzuri tzuri, ve'lav latabo.
Turn ahead now to page 39 as we are getting ready to move into our evening service. And I invite you, if you're comfortable and able to do so, to please rise.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai
may be seated. Amen. We turn to the top of page top of page 40.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו לאורך ימינו, לאורך ימינו, ובהם נהיה יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה. ידך תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Amen. We turn to page 41, and Emily will join us on the bima to help lead us in the words of Shema and V'ahavta.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levacha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol yodecha, v'hayu הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום בלבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטרפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
We continue silently on page 42.
ויהי שם אשר תהיו שכם ושכם ותצברו יותר חשוב. Adonai Elohechem emet.
Continue on the top of page 44.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים בני ישראל לחדשו בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך רבניך בקהים לפני משה זה ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ומאי יוודע את יעקב וגולו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני ישראל.
Amen. We turn to page 45 for Hashkivenu, our evening prayer for peace and protection. And in a moment, we'll sing together 3 lines up from the bottom in Hebrew and in the transliteration, the words, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, may you spread over us a canopy of peace, God's canopy of peace over us and over the entire world, which is a beautiful image to imagine as if we were all kind of enveloped in this canopy or talit or embrace of peace and protection and comfort and safety and security. And at times where the world seems so very broken, it can feel hard to feel that. And as we think back on this week, we can see how much tragedy and brokenness there is in our world. From waking up at the beginning of the week to the news of 6 hostages being murdered so close to when they might have been saved, to a school shooting in Georgia later on this week. There's just all over the world, it seems like there's just so much tragedy around us that it could be hard to find hope and hard to let ourselves feel joy. And yet we also know that we need to feel joy. We need to allow ourselves to do that as well, and to be able to find ways to move from grief to hope and out into the world. And so as we sing these words, Ufros Aleinu Sukat Shlomecha, I want to invite you, close your eyes if you like, to just picture in your mind and hold in your heart all of those who you might wish to send this prayer to this evening, whether it's an individual or a family or a nation or a part of the world, to send this prayer to all of those who are in need of this kind of peace and security and comfort and compassion as we move into Shabbat, so that, God willing, we can find a day and move toward a moment where peace will prevail throughout the world.
Ufros Aleinu Sukat Shlomecha Ufros Aleinu Sukat Shlomecha Baruch atah Adonai haborei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim.
May we soon see a world filled with peace. We'll turn to page 46, and Emily will lead us, along with Cantor Benjamin, with the words of Vishamru. We're in it together. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם.
ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים, את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ויאמר דברה כרותי וימליך מלכותי.
בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל. בגלה, בגלה, ובזמן קריב.
ואמרו
אמן. יהי שמירה במברך, ויעלם ליעלמי עלמיה יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא V'yit hadar, v'yit halal, v'yit halal. Shemita kudasha.
V'rechu.
Le'elach minchol birchata v'shirata.
Tushbechata nechemata Damiran Dilma.
V'imaru.
Amen. Thank you, Emily. We turn now to page 47 for our evening Amidah, and we move through our evening Amidah silently. So I will invite you to rise if you're comfortable and able to do so. And we'll move through from pages 47 to 52 at our own pace. Feel free to do so in Hebrew or in English, or to just take a nice quiet moment of reflection for yourselves, and we'll conclude together with a prayer for peace.
Say shalom imramav, say shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael. Amen.
Now that you've got comfy, I'm going to invite you to rise again as we turn to page 53 for Me'in Sheva.
Vayichulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam Vayichal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa Vayishpot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa Vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i Vayikodesh oto Ki bo Shabbat mikol malachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon Kodei Shamayim Ba'aretz, Magen Avot Bidvaro, Mechaye Meitim B'Ma'amaro, Ha'el Hagadosh She'en Kamohu, Ha'iniach Liyamo B'Yom Shabbat Kodsho, Kivam Ratza Lehaniach Lahem, Kivam Ratza Lehaniach Vahem, Lefanav Navod B'Yira Ufachad, V'nodeh Lishmo B'chol Yom Tamid, Me'on HaRachot El HaHor shalom. Megadesh HaShabbat u'mevarech shemi u'meniach b'hitusha li'amitu shnei yoneg zecher l'maseh v'reishit.
Page 54.
Eloheinu v'Avotenu v'Imotenu ritzei v'imnuchatenu kanishenu b'mitzvotecha v'tin chalkenu b'toratecha sabinu mituvecha v'samchenu b'shuatecha v'taher libeinu le'ovdecha v'yemet v'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu v'yava v'ratzon Shabbat Chodshecha v'yenuchu v'Yisrael Mekadeshei Shemecha Baruch atah Adonai Mi'adesh HaShabbat. Rabbi Gelash Mirabba, Biamani Rakher Tebin, the Kmachate Bakai, Konobi Mekon of Kaidu Be Israel, Bagalaz Merkavimro, Amen, Yaheshme Rabba Mevarach, Le'alam Le'am Me'amaya Yedbarach. Yemelach Mishabak Feed, Artwa Mina Savid, David, Levit, Laush, Mero Shabarichu, Yemiko Bekhatam Mishunat, Juj Bekhatam Nekamasa, Damian Rami, Amavimro, Amen. Think about the Lord, Honmi, the Kodoko Israel, Kodom Hodishvimro, Amen. Heslamra, Michamaya, Vachaim, Balimu, Koisro, Amen. Ois Nation Mafia Station Shalom, Ko Israel, Koishmi, Belvimro. Amen.
You may be seated. So I wanted to take a minute to look at our Torah portion for this week. And so tomorrow you'll get to hear some of Emily's reflections on her Torah portion, and there's a lot of interesting things that are happening here. We've been getting a lot in Deuteronomy of reminders of all of the things that we're supposed to do, and if we do good things, then good things will happen, and also a reminder of a lot of the bad things, and if we do bad things, then bad things will happen. And so we're kind of like in like the big overview of a review of all of the things that we should remember, because the Israelites are here all gathered together as they're about to enter the promised land, and all throughout Deuteronomy, all throughout Devarim, Moses is reiterating everything that's important before they go in, because we learn that he won't be going with them. So at the very end of Devarim, he goes up on a mountain, and we assume he dies there, and he doesn't get to go with them. So we're in the review period right now. So Emily's going to focus a little bit tomorrow on some qualities of leaders and things that we learn in our parsha, because there's a lot of, in this particular parsha, a lot of interesting kind of scenarios that will come up so that we can think about how to treat one another and how to govern one another, which is interesting, and also in part because it's a recognition that there will be a gift that they will, God willing, be able to govern themselves. And for people who, generations before were slaves, where that wasn't an opportunity that they had, it comes with a hope and an assurance that will be the case moving forward. So I wanted to just take a minute to look at the very beginning of the parsha. And so I'm going to read for you just the first 3 lines, and then there's a piece that I wanted to raise up for you, but feel free to ask whatever questions that you guys have too. So I'll just read it in English. So it starts out like this. You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes and all the settlements that Adonai your God is giving you, and you shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that Adonai your God is giving you. Those are the first 3 lines. We're in the middle of like a much longer telling, so it's not like this is where we're beginning. This is like where the new chapter continues. So before I take us somewhere, do you have any questions, or is there something that's like popping up for you as I read these 3 lines aloud for those who can kind of take this in orally? Okay. So the piece that I wanted to raise up for us is, there's a lot of verses in Torah, and maybe our trivia man, Cantor Benjamin, can tell us how many verses in Torah there are at some point, because I'm sure there'll be a question in one of his quizzes at some point. There's a lot of verses of Torah, but I would say that the very last piece that I just read here, which in Hebrew is tzedek tzedek tirdof, is arguably one of the more popular phrases of Torah that we have. Like if we were going to make a top 10, that would definitely be in it. And actually, if you look at this carpet-looking thing on our wall, that's what it says. So you can see on one side it says tzedek, on the other side it says tzedek, and on the bottom it says tirdof, and it even has the verse there from Deuteronomy 16:20. So justice, justice shall you pursue. So why is this such an important verse that we have in Torah? A question for you. What would you say? Why does this feel like such an important verse that would make it into at least my top 10, and I would say others as well? What's so special about it? Yeah, it's like you see it on one side and then you have to turn, yeah.
Yes, the one side is written
Backwards, yeah.
yes.
But it is there. We had an artist in residence a number of years ago, and that was a part of that program. It was like 8 years ago, I think. So one of the things that we learn about Torah is that, sometimes there's things in here that feel really important, so it's a good thing for us to learn. Sometimes they might feel really obvious, and so we might wonder why we need to say it at all. Sometimes it might be downright strange, and we're like, what on earth are we supposed to take from this? What might we have been supposed to take from this then, and even more so, what might we need to take from this today? But one of the things that we learn about Torah is that there is no word or even letter wasted in Torah, that everything is important and everything is there for a reason. And what we will later see, because there's Torah, and there's sort of like reading the pshat, or like the simple level of Torah, and what we can sort of gain from that. And sometimes, again, there's like really important things, like you shouldn't steal, or you shouldn't, murder. Like those are like really important things, like just at face value. But then what we'll also see is that, in Judaism, it's not just the Torah text that's important. It is all of the generations of commentary that have come after it ever since, that continues to go on today. And all of that is a part of this as well. And so the rabbis in the Talmud, for those of you who've had a chance or who will have a chance to study Talmud, you'll often see that rabbis will raise up different pieces of Torah text in different moments to try to answer questions of what is it that we're supposed to do with this. And so they'll try to say we can learn X, Y, and Z, and it's based on this Torah text. And different Torah texts will become hooks for different things that we're supposed to learn. So if that's the case, and every word and every verse is important in Torah, then wouldn't it have been enough to say tzedek tirdof instead of tzedek tirdof? Justice you shall pursue. Okay, got it. Good idea. We should do that. Hopefully we're already doing that. So what is gained when the Torah, it's not a mistake. Every Torah says it, and it has for all time. So what is gained by adding the word tzedek a second time in that sentence? Thoughts? Anything?
That's what we called it to the top 10.
Genevieve, they're marketing. Okay, so emphasis. Like it's a pay attention. I mean, I think that's a really good point. That there are so many verses of Torah that we could easily just sort of go one to the other and kind of not pay attention to it. And especially in a world where, imagine for a long time, so this is the written text that was passed down. We also learned that there's oral Torah that was passed down to Moses, and that has come to us, and that became the Mishnah, which then got added, the Gemara got added to it, and that became the Talmud. But the written Torah that was in our scrolls that we'll read from tomorrow was passed down for a long time. But for a long time, not everyone could read it. Not everyone had one, not everyone had access to one, and not everyone could read it. And so you had to rely on hearing it. And so Jews would go to the marketplace in Jerusalem and to be able to hear Torah on Mondays, Thursdays, and on Shabbat. And those were the market days, Mondays and Thursdays, and then also Shabbat. And Torah was read. So if you're hearing it, and all of a sudden you hear tzedek, tzedek, like you're paying attention. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, pay attention. Great. So maybe one of the reasons that it's not redundant and that it's intentionally put here is to make us pay attention. Awesome. Anything else? Ken or Benjamin, feel free to jump in. Or Genevieve.
I'll jump in for both.
Excellent.
Is it possible that it could be just justice, or is it definitely justice?
Okay, so how do we translate it? So good question. So every translation is an interpretation, surely. In this case, it is the same word doubled. It could there are other ways of sort of grammatically sometimes saying the same thing for emphasis. So it's like, it kind of would sound like you're like, he goingly went. Like, I mean, it's sort of a strange thing. But in this case, it is the same word. But maybe it's there to teach us a little something about the justice that we're supposed to pursue. Beautiful.
Or is it two separate concepts? Is it you're saying justice by itself that has some meaning,
Uh-huh.
and your next phrase is that justice you should pursue. So what's the justice by itself?
Okay, so it's one of those like, is there punctuation? Where do you put it? Like, go, right, exactly. Like, go eat, comma, grandma, or go eat, grandma. It's like it matters if there's punctuation. So in this case, let's see. The Torah trope. So our Torah trope acts as our punctuation, and the Torah. Yeah, so the Torah trope has it like kind of going together, basically, in like sort of like in a coupled phrase. So if it were like an etnachta after the first tzedek and like something new after and like a mercha for the second one, that would sort of insinuate like a comma.
But is the trope written at the same time the Torah was written? Was the Torah written with trope?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean, there's no
It's-
trope in the
There's,
Torah scroll.
it's true. It's a
There's
true.
no vowels either.
There's no vowels. Yeah.
That's my point. But
Right, but
who
it's-
added the trope? Did the person who wrote the Torah say, "Oh, there's trope. I chose not to put it in," or did it get added later?
It's a good question.
No, God told someone to write it.
Right, I mean, this is the tradition that we have of how it's been said for a long time. So presumably, it's been there the whole time. Presumably. It isn't, well, where did Torah come from? Who really wrote the Torah? That's a whole other question. Yeah. Yeah.
If tzedek tirdof is in your top 10, historically, I'm curious, when did the rest of the sentence get dropped out?
Oh, so like why not the rest? Okay, so the rest of the sentence goes, justice, justice shall you pursue so that you may thrive and occupy your land. So,
It does?
yeah, right?
But right, I mean, I'm a lawyer, you can find those
Yeah,
3 words you can find on everybody's wall.
Right?
Jewish lawyer's wall.
yeah, absolutely.
The rest of the sentence kind
It kind,
of disappears.
you're right.
That happened.
I don't. That's a good question. I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that. But I think it is convenient, and we do that all the time. And we do that all the time in English too, right? Like, I mean, we sort of like hold on to one quote that we really like and forget the rest of the poem or whatever it is. And so, most of the things that we have in this section, which if you don't know where tzedek, tzedek, tirdof comes from, you wouldn't necessarily know. But a lot of the things that we have throughout Deuteronomy is, we kind of are reminded again and again that all of this is so that, not only is it so that we can kind of maintain our connection with our community and with God, but we need to merit to stay on the land. And if we don't do there's no neutral. It's like if we do all of these things, we get to stay. And if we don't do all of these things, like we'll be kicked out. And that's what the rabbis will say happened during the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem. That because of sinat chinam, because of baseless hatred, everyone was so horrible to one another, and so we were exiled. And so thank God we've been able to go back. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question to raise up for today. Yeah, Benjamin.
Well, there's the system of gematria where you assign a number to all the different letters, and the number assigned to the letter tzadi is 90. So if you have 2 tzadis in there,
like that.
So, by doubling your justice, you have a longer life in the land which our United God gives.
Bravo, we should just end there.
Back to math.
Always, always.
That is just not my thing. It can't, anything more than basic addition, I'm lost.
Well, I will, I guess, leave you with some of those questions to consider for yourselves of why this might be important. A lot of commentators have said a lot of different things about why this might have been. But a lot of them, one of them will sort of say that, having both of them kind of is a way for us to think about that, if we pursue justice in this life, then we'll not only get rewards in this life, but it will also be in the world to come. So one tzedek is like to represent this life, and one tzedek is like the hereafter. But most commentators really do kind of come down actually with what Becca was saying, that justice shall you pursue is important because we need to remember when we are on the path to pursue justice, to do it justly, and to do it in a manner that, in which there's no falsehood, in which maybe we're bringing our best selves and all of the empathy and compassion that we might, need to, and that's appropriate in whatever the moment is, and that it's telling us not just to do it and to do it at all costs, but to think about who we are and how we're going about it. There was a rabbi that I worked with when I started rabbinical school, and we were working on this Tikkun Olam project and repairing the world. And, and he would tell this story sometimes and say, if a person is on their way to a Save the Whale benefit, but on the way, they run a red light, cut off another driver, and yell at it, almost hit a pedestrian, like we're kind of missing the point. So it's great to be pursuing good causes in our lives, but we have to not get blinded by that also. And that can happen in so many ways. I mean, just think about the world, the news, the ways in which, folks might kind of be standing up for one thing and ignoring the rest, the ways in which, while you're trying to fight for justice in one area, you're kind of missing the boat depending on how you're doing it, and if you're hurting others in the process. And so, we might, God willing, we are already engaged with hoping and praying for justice every day. But we can't let the inability to achieve justice or the reality that it might sometimes take longer than we would like, or maybe we're going to have failures along the way, to stop us from trying. And we have to also remember to be inspired along the way, so that we can continue that pursuit in a way that will inspire justice around us, and God willing, bring it into the world. So it's kind of a good thing to think about, both in the world at this moment, and because we're in the month of Elul. So this week we began the month of Elul, and this is the month immediately preceding the high holidays, where we're really meant to begin the work of getting ready for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And so it is a good time to think about and to consider perhaps how we might be embodying this imperative, this instruction in our lives. How are we pursuing justice? And how are we doing that? What is the manner in which we're doing that? Are we doing that in a way that is just? Are we doing that in a way that brings others in to help us, to do it with us? And are we able to keep trying, even when sometimes the results might not come out as we had hoped? Even if we don't always achieve it along the way, can we get up and try again the next day? So I thank you for the conversation, and I hope that we can continue to discover and to hold one another, and to find strength as we move through this journey together, and to have compassion so that we can be open to whatever the needs are around us as we continue to pursue justice every day. So, and more on our Torah portion tomorrow from Emily. All right, well, I will take us back to our service and invite Emily up to the bima as we turn to page 55 for Kiddush. We have a siddur. And it's grape juice, it's not wine.
Okay. Here we go. Ready? Okay, well, you're going to try anyway. Here we go.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'ei kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'charta, v'yotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. Amen. You can drink it now. Very carefully, since you're wearing white.
Where you go. Go ahead.
Just a sip.
It's literally grape juice. Oh, good. There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
We turn to page 56, and I invite you to rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gdula liyotzeh reshit, yelo asan higaye haratzon, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo samchakenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר, היה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
You may be seated. We turn to page 58 for Mourner's Kaddish. And this week in our community, we observe the yard sites, the anniversary of the passing of Marcia Abrams, Esther Fox, William Fox, James Nathan Gaffin, Ann Ingber, Joan Inselberg, Melvin Kaner, Phyllis Lieberman, Mary Lorber, Milton Mendelson, Fanny Reingold, Louis Rosenberg, Ruth Sachs, Stanley Schindler, Adrian Sclair, Sidney Solomon Slutsky, Samuel Solnick, Janet Sadaloff, Theodore Tabachnik, Morris Trackman, Ruth Weston, and Morris Uter. We also extend our condolences to Marcia Gale and her family on the passing of her mom and a longtime member, Helen Daniel Stam. I want to invite those who are in mourning or observing a yard site to rise, and if you'd like to share the name of the folks you're remembering, feel free to do so. We continue with Mourner's Kaddish on page 58. Yitzgadal v'yitzkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divra kirutei, v'yalmich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye zechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lomei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudasha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechmata da'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Seh shalom b'imromav Huya aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all who dwell on earth, and we say together, amen.
Amen.
I know, the Eagles are coming. I look forward to welcoming you all back here tomorrow morning at 9:30 as we begin our Shabbat morning service to celebrate as Emily becomes bat mitzvah. And we have lots of things going on in our community coming up, and you are always welcome back. Sunday morning, we begin religious school for kindergarten through sixth graders. And actually, next Friday night will be our first Kehillah Shabbat of the year, which is a service that is musical with instruments. And we have many other things happening that night, starting with our first Shabbat Shebang for our early childhood center families. It'll be, hopefully, God willing, weather permitting, in the playground. And we'll get to play and sing and bring in Shabbat together. And then we will also be officially unveiling and dedicating the newly named Valerie Hurwitz Early Childhood Center. So the letters were going up today on the building, and so we'll have an opportunity to celebrate Val, our esteemed executive director who retired at the end of last year after 48 years. And then we'll move on into Kehillah Shabbat and dinner. And we also have that Sunday a really exciting program where the Soferet, who has been helping us to update some of our Torah scrolls, will be here to do some education with our community. So it should be really interesting. She's a great teacher and a lot of fun. So always welcome to come back. But for now, we will conclude our service with a little blessing for you all, and then a blessing over some challah. And we're going to be on page 75 if you want to follow along. But on Friday evenings, there is a tradition for parents to bless their children with these ancient words. And if you have loved ones near you and you want to put your arm around them, you're welcome to do so. Not required, just an invitation. If you have loved ones far from here, you can hold them in your minds and in your hearts, and also send this blessing to them as well. May God bless you and protect you. May God's face give light to you and show you favor. May God's face be lifted towards you and bestow upon you peace. May it be God's will. Amen.
Amen.
For you, my friend.
Now it's both.
First, you have to bless it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Yeah.